all of these actions that they did, at the end of the day, they were unavoidable. They were going to happen one way or the other, and there was nothing that we could have done to avoid them, which tells us two things. Number one, we just have to accept that this is who they are, and that is kind of a hard acceptance to make. But the second thing, which I think is the most important part, is that it truly has nothing to do with us. So I've been getting some questions on TikTok about how do we not internalize and how do we not absorb the narcissist actions against us as something that isn't a reflection about us and isn't a reflection about our own worth. Because here's my thoughts and here's my opinion. There's nothing that we could have done to avoid what they did in the relationship, whether it was the cheating, whether it was the gaslighting, whether it was the discard. All of these actions that they did, at the end of the day, they were unavoidable. They were going to happen one way or the other, and there was nothing that we could have done to avoid them, which tells us two things. Number one, we just have to accept that this is who they are, and that is kind of a hard acceptance to make. But the second thing, which I think is the most important part, is that it truly has nothing to do with us. So I had someone ask, well, what does that mean, that it doesn't have anything to do with us? And it's really simple. We were essentially just a cog in their machine. They were going to act this way. They were going to do what they did, regardless if it was you or your neighbor down the street. They act this way with every single person that comes in and out of their life, which means it has nothing to do with us. They have a pattern of behavior that essentially they just put on repeat every time they have a new supply. And again, that's hard to accept. It's painful to accept. We didn't mean to them what they meant to us because we were in it. Like, we loved them with our whole being. We were ride or die for this person. Like, we would have and probably did do anything for them, but that wasn't reciprocated for us because they were essentially just going through their cycle. And that is a painful thing to accept, which is also why it's so hard for us to accept it sometimes, because nobody wants to realize that we didn't mean as much to somebody as they meant to us. But the thing that should be freeing about that is that it's not a reflection on what you did or didn't do in the relationship. It's not a reflection on what you lack. It's not a reflection on what things that you did wrong, or it has nothing to do with any of that stuff. It has everything to do with them and it being who they are, that this is just what they do. And they go around the world and go around with people that come in and out of their life, and they just wreak havoc. And why this is important is because when we internalize what they did as something that has to do with us, it inevitably affects our self-worth, and it inevitably affects our healing because we're constantly going back and forth of, could I have done things better? Was I the problem? Were they right about me? And we have to get that narrative out of our head that it had something to do with us, because I promise you, they did all of the same stuff with the supply before you. And if they don't have a new supply yet, they will, and they're going to do all the exact same things to the next person. So go into an acceptance phase, which again, I know is painful, but we have to get there if we're going to move forward. And then also realize they were working so hard for you to believe that it was you, so that way you couldn't see that it really was them.